The mistake wasn't the spill. It was the second she looked up and met his eyes. Zaraya's hands trembled as she adjusted the serving tray, the crystal glasses catching the light from the massive chandelier overhead. The penthouse stretched before her like something out of a magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline, marble floors so polished she could see her nervous reflection, and guests who wore wealth like a second skin. She didn't belong here. The catering agency had called her at the last minute. Emergency replacement. Double pay. Cash. She'd said yes before asking questions because rent was due and her bank account had been crying for weeks. Now, surrounded by men in suits that probably cost more than her rent and women dripping in diamonds, she wondered if any amount of money was worth this suffocating atmosphere. Something felt wrong. The guests didn't laugh like normal people at parties. They spoke in low murmurs, their eyes constantly scanning, assessing. Security personnel lined the walls, too many for a simple corporate gathering. These weren't regular bodyguards either. They had the kind of stillness that came from knowing exactly how to hurt someone. Zaraya moved through the crowd with her tray of champagne, trying to be invisible. That was the job. Serve. Smile politely. Don't make eye contact. Don't ask questions. Disappear into the background. She was doing fine until she wasn't. A guest moved suddenly, turning without looking. Zaraya tried to pivot, but her heel caught on the edge of an expensive rug. Time slowed in that horrible way it does when you know disaster is coming and can't stop it. The tray tilted. Glasses slid. Champagne arced through the air in a golden spray. Most of it missed the guest. But droplets caught the sleeve of the man standing beside him. A man Zaraya hadn't even noticed until that moment. The room went silent. Not gradually. Instantly. As if someone had cut the sound. Zaraya didn't know why silence felt worse than shouting. In her experience, silence meant a decision had already been made. Her heart stopped. She looked up from the wet marble floor, following the line of that dampened sleeve upward, and that's when she met his eyes. Lee Do-hyun. She didn't know his name yet, but she knew immediately that he was the center of gravity in this room. Everything and everyone orbited around him. He was younger than she expected, maybe early 30s, with sharp features that would have been beautiful if they weren't so carefully controlled. Dark eyes. Darker expression. The kind of face that gave nothing away. He stood perfectly still, looking down at his sleeve, then at the champagne pooling near his Italian leather shoes. The security personnel moved first. Two men in black suits materialized beside Zaraya so fast she gasped. Hands reached for her arms. She heard herself apologizing, words tumbling out in a panicked rush. "I'm so sorry I didn't. It was an accident, I'm so sorry. Take her to the..." One guard started. Do-hyun raised a single finger. Everyone froze. He hadn't looked up. Hadn't raised his voice. Just lifted one finger, and the world stopped moving. The guard's hands hovered an inch from Zaraya's arms but didn't touch. The other guests stood like statues. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Do-hyun's eyes met Zaraya's again, and this time she saw something flicker in them. Curiosity, maybe, or calculation. He studied her face with the intensity of someone reading a document, looking for something specific. She must have looked terrified. She was terrified. Her whole body shook, and she couldn't have hidden it if she tried. Maybe that's what he saw, the genuine fear. Not the calculated kind that came from knowing who he was. The simple, honest fear of someone who just ruined everything and didn't understand why the entire room had turned to ice. "Your name," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried. The kind of voice that didn't need volume because everyone was already listening. "Zaraya," she stammered. "Zaraya Scott." He nodded once, as if filing this information away somewhere important. Then he looked at his security team. "She stays." 2 words. That's all it took. Quick question before we go on. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. We love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you're enjoying this one so far, don't forget to subscribe. The guard stepped back immediately. The tension in the room didn't break. It shifted, transforming into something else. Confusion, maybe. Or speculation. The other guests exchanged glances that Zaraya couldn't read. Do-hyun pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and dabbed at his sleeve with movements so precise they seemed choreographed. He handed the cloth to one of his men without looking, his eyes still on Zaraya. "Clean this up," he said, gesturing vaguely at the spilled champagne. "Get her a new tray." Then he walked away and the room exhaled. Zaraya stood rooted to the spot as staff members hurried to mop up the champagne. Someone handed her a fresh tray. Someone else whispered that she should keep moving, keep serving and act normal. But what was normal about any of this? She was supposed to be fired. At minimum. The way those guards had moved, the way everyone had reacted, she could have been thrown out. Or worse. But instead he'd said she stays, and now she was still here. And everyone was looking at her with expressions that ranged from curiosity to something that looked almost like pity. An older woman in a catering uniform sidled up to her as Zaraya collected empty glasses. "You're lucky," she whispered, her accent thick and her eyes worried. "Very lucky." "Who is he?" Zaraya asked. The woman's face went pale. "Don't ask questions. Don't draw his attention again. Just. It's too late for that, isn't it?" The woman didn't answer. She just gripped Zaraya's arm once, squeezed hard like a warning, then disappeared into the kitchen. Zaraya continued serving on autopilot, her mind racing. She watched Du-hyun from across the room. He stood with a group of men who all had that same dangerous stillness. They spoke in Korean, their conversation too quiet to overhear, but their body language told her everything she needed to know. These weren't businessmen. Or if they were, business wasn't their only enterprise. She circulated past a group of women in designer dresses, their perfume so strong it made her eyes water. "Did you see the way he looked at her?" one whispered in English. "Lee Du-hyun doesn't look at anyone like that," another responded. "What's so special about a clumsy waitress?" Maybe that's exactly what's special. She didn't know who he was. Their voices faded as Zaraya moved away, but their words stuck. She glanced back at Du-hyun and found him watching her. Not obviously. He was still engaged in conversation, nodding at something a silver-haired man said. But his eyes tracked her movement across the room with the precision of someone keeping inventory. She wasn't being protected. She was being kept. And she had no idea what happened to people he stopped keeping. The realization hit her like cold water. Whatever was happening, it wasn't kindness. It was interest. And she had no idea if that was better or worse than being thrown out. Time passed in fragments. Long enough for her hands to ache. Long enough for the sense of being watched to sink into her bones. The party continued around her, but the atmosphere never quite returned to normal. Or maybe this was normal for these people, this undercurrent of tension, this sense that violence was always one wrong word away. Zaraya was collecting glasses near the hallway when she heard voices. Sharp. Urgent. She shouldn't have stopped. Shouldn't have listened. But her feet planted themselves, and her ears betrayed her. The shipment from Busan. A man's voice speaking English with a heavy accent. Not here. That was Du-hyun, his tone colder than ice. We agreed. Nothing tonight. The Japanese are moving faster than expected. If we don't. I said not here. Silence. Then footsteps approaching. Zaraya's heart jumped into her throat. She turned quickly, trying to look like she just arrived, just been passing through. But Du-hyun emerged from the hallway and stopped when he saw her. Their eyes met. His narrowed slightly. How much did you hear? He asked. Nothing, Zaraya said automatically. I didn't, I was just. Don't lie to me. The words weren't threatening in tone, but they hit like a threat anyway. He stepped closer, and she noticed details she'd missed before. A thin scar along his jawline. Cufflinks that caught the light. Gold, expensive, engraved with something in Korean. The way he moved with absolute confidence, like someone who'd never had to doubt his place in any room. I heard voices, Zaraya admitted, her voice smaller than she wanted. But I don't understand what any of it means. I don't speak Korean and I don't know what's happening here. I'm just trying to do my job and leave. He studied her for a long moment. But you can't leave now. What? You heard something you shouldn't have. You've seen faces you shouldn't have seen. Even if you don't understand. He paused, choosing his words carefully. It's safer if you stay where I can see you. Safer for who? A ghost of something, amusement maybe, flickered across his face. For you. He walked away before she could respond, leaving her standing in the hallway with a tray of dirty glasses and the dawning horror of what he'd just told her. She wasn't free to leave. She was being watched. Contained. The night dragged on. Zaraya continued working because there was nothing else to do. But she felt Do-hyun's attention on her like a physical weight. Every time she glanced up, he was somewhere in her line of sight. Not always looking directly at her, but always be aware. Around midnight something changed. The silver-haired man from earlier appeared at Do-hyun's side, whispering urgently. Do-hyun's expression didn't change, but his posture did, going from relaxed to alert in an instant. He said something back and the man disappeared. Within minutes, several guests were being ushered out. Not all of them, just specific ones. The atmosphere shifted again, tension ratcheting up another notch. The remaining guests weren't just dangerous, they were the most dangerous. Zaraya could feel it in the way they moved, spoke, breathed. She was near the bar when she felt someone behind her. Too close. She turned and found herself face to face with a man she hadn't seen before. Younger than Do-hyun. Handsome in a sharp, cruel way. He smiled at her, and it was the kind of smile that made her skin crawl. "You're the one who spilled champagne on Do-hyun," he said in perfect English. "It was an accident." Of course it was. His smile widened. "Still here, though. That's interesting. He usually doesn't like complications." "I don't know what you're talking about." "No." He leaned in, and she smelled alcohol and expensive cologne. "Let me tell you something about Lee Do-hyun. He doesn't keep people around for fun. If you're still here, it's because you're useful. Or you're bait. Either way. Step back." Do-hyun's voice cut through the air like a blade. He appeared beside them so fast Zaraya didn't see him move. One moment he was across the room. The next he was there, positioned slightly in front of her. His body a barrier between her and the other man. The young man's smile faltered. "Do-hyun. You were just leaving." It wasn't a suggestion. The young man's jaw tightened, but he nodded and walked away. The moment he was gone, Do-hyun turned to Zaraya. "Stay close to me tonight," he said quietly. "Why?" Zaraya asked, finding some courage from somewhere. "What's going on?" "There are people here who would hurt you to hurt me. But I don't mean anything to you. I'm nobody." His eyes held hers. "That's not true anymore." Before she could process that statement, someone shouted in Korean. Glass shattered. The room erupted into chaos. Zaraya didn't understand what was happening. Bodies moved too fast. Someone grabbed her arm, not gently. She cried out and tried to pull away, but the grip tightened. She caught a glimpse of an unfamiliar face. A man pulling her toward the exit. Then Do-hyun was there. She didn't see how he moved or what exactly he did. She just heard a sharp crack, a grunt of pain, and suddenly she was free. The man who'd grabbed her was on the ground. Do-hyun stood over him, perfectly still again. But there was something in his eyes now. Something dark and cold that made her understand exactly what he was capable of. Blood dripped from the other man's nose. Do-hyun's knuckles were split. He looked at Zaraya. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, mute with shock. "Come with me." He took her arm, not roughly but firmly, and pulled her away from the main room, down a corridor she hadn't noticed before. They entered a room that looked like an office. Expensive. Masculine. Dark wood and leather and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Do-hyun locked the door behind them and leaned against it, his chest rising and falling slightly faster than normal. That was the only sign that anything had happened. Otherwise, he looked completely composed. Zaraya, meanwhile, felt like she was going to shake apart. What was that?" she managed. "A reminder that my enemies think they can get to me through anyone I show interest in. But you don't, you're not." She couldn't finish the sentence. "Interested in you?" He pushed off the door and walked to a side table where crystal decanters sat. He poured himself a drink, then paused and looked at her. "Do you drink? Right now?" "Yes." He poured a second glass and handed it to her. Their fingers brushed. The touch lasted a fraction of a second longer than necessary. Zaraya drank. Whiskey. It burned going down, but the heat felt good, real grounding. "I can get you out," Do-hyun said after a moment. "Money. Protection. A new apartment if you need one. All I ask is that you never mention tonight. Never speak my name. Never cross my path again." It was a generous offer. An escape. She should have taken it immediately. "Why?" she asked instead. Why what? Why me? Why did you stop them from throwing me out? Why are you protecting me now? I'm nobody. Like I said. He was quiet for a long moment, studying his glass. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than before. Because you didn't pretend. What? Everyone in that room. Everyone I meet, they perform. They hide their real reactions. Show me what they think I want to see. Fear, yes, but calculated fear. Useful fear. He looked up at her. But you, when you looked at me after spilling that champagne, you were genuinely terrified. Not because you knew who I was. Because you'd made a mistake and didn't know what it would cost you. That kind of honesty is... He paused, searching for the word. Rare. Zariah's heart was doing something complicated in her chest. That's why you kept me here? Because I was scared. Because you were real. He took a step closer. In my world, Miss Scott, real is more valuable than diamonds. The air between them changed, thickened. Zariah was suddenly very aware of how alone they were, how close he stood, how his eyes had gone from cold to something warmer. Not soft, she doubted Lee Do-hyun did soft, but present, focused entirely on her. I should take your offer, she said, but she didn't move. I should leave and never look back. You should. But I? She stopped, unsure how to finish. But you won't, he said quietly. It wasn't a question. I don't understand this. Any of this. I don't understand you. Good. Understanding me would be dangerous. And this isn't? He smiled then. A real smile, small and slightly crooked. It transformed his face, made him look younger. Human. This is extremely dangerous. They stood there, close enough that Zariah could smell his cologne. Something expensive and subtle. Close enough that she could see the exact shade of his eyes. Not black, but very dark brown with flecks of amber. Close enough that when he reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, she felt the calluses on his fingertips. You should be terrified of me, he said softly. I am. Then why are you still standing here? She didn't have a good answer. Or maybe she did, but it was too frightening to say out loud. Because despite everything, the danger, the blood, the chaos, she felt safer in this room with him than she had all night. Because something in his eyes made her think he saw her, really saw her, in a way no one else ever had. Because when he touched her hair, his hand had been so gentle it made her chest ache. I don't know, she whispered. His hand moved from her hair to her jaw, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. You should go, he said. But he didn't step back. Neither did she. The moment stretched. His eyes dropped to her lips. Her breath caught. He leaned in so slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Their lips were an inch apart when someone pounded on the door. Do-hyun. A man's voice, urgent. Korean words Zariah didn't understand. Do-hyun closed his eyes briefly, jaw tightening. Then he stepped back, the moment shattering like glass. He opened the door and had a rapid conversation with whoever was on the other side. Zariah caught tension in every word, though she understood none of them. When he turned back to her, his expression had changed again. Not cold exactly, but controlled. The mask back in place. I need to handle something, he said. Stay here. Don't open this door for anyone but me. What's happening? The people who tried to take you, they're making a statement. I need to make one back. Fear clutched at her throat. You're going to hurt someone. Yes. He said it without hesitation or apology. But not you. Never you. He left before she could respond, locking the door behind him. Zariah stood alone in the office, shaking. She should call someone. The police. A friend. Anyone. But who would she call? And what would she say? She'd stumbled into something way beyond her understanding, and the only person who could get her out of it safely had just walked away to do something violent. She sank into one of the leather chairs and put her head in her hands. Time passed. She didn't know how much. 20 minutes? An hour? The whiskey sat untouched on the side table. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Texts from the catering agency asking where she was, but she ignored them. Finally the lock clicked. The door opened. Do-hyun entered and Zariah's breath caught. He looked different. Tired. There was blood on his shirt. Not much, but enough. His knuckles were more split than before. But his expression was calm. Whatever he'd done, it was finished. He saw her looking at the blood and glanced down. "It's not mine," he said simply. "I should be horrified by that," Zariah heard herself say. "Are you?" She thought about lying. But he'd valued her honesty before. And something told her that honesty mattered now more than ever. "I don't know. Maybe I should be. But I'm mostly just relieved you're okay." Something flickered in his expression. Surprise maybe. Or something softer. He walked to the desk, pulled out a first aid kit, and began wrapping his knuckles with practiced efficiency. Zariah stood and moved closer without thinking. "Let me," she said. He paused, then held out his hands. She took them gently, unwrapping what he'd started and doing it properly. Her hands were steadier than she expected. This close she could see details. The way his breathing had deepened. How he watched her face while she worked. The tension in his shoulders gradually releasing. "You should still leave," he said quietly. "This is your last chance. After tonight if you stay." He trailed off. "If I stay what? Then you're mine." The words hung in the air between them. Possessive. Absolute. The kind of claim that should have sent her running. But her hands didn't stop moving, didn't pull away from his. "I'm not property," she said carefully. "No. You're not." He waited until she finished bandaging his left hand before continuing. "But if you stay in my life, I protect what's mine. I claim what I care about. And everyone will know that hurting you means answering to me." His eyes met hers. "Can you live with that?" Could she? 24 hours ago, she was a normal girl with normal problems. Rent, bills, a job she hated. Now she was standing in the office of a man who just made someone bleed because they tried to take her away. A man who looked at her like she was something precious and dangerous all at once. "Why would you do that?" she asked. "You don't even know me." "I know enough. You know I was scared and honest." "That's not." "I know you stayed when anyone sensible would have run. I know you looked at blood on my shirt and your first thought was relief that I was safe." "I know." He turned his hands in hers so he was holding them instead. His bandaged knuckles rough against her skin. "That something in me recognized something in you. And I don't question that kind of certainty." Zariah's heart was thundering now. This was insane. All of it. She should say no. Should take the money and protection and disappear into a normal life where men didn't bleed for her, and words like claim didn't make her pulse race. But when she opened her mouth, what came out was, "I'm terrified. Of me. Of this. Of how much I want to say yes even though it's the worst possible decision." His thumb stroked across her knuckles. "It probably is. You're not supposed to agree with me. I don't lie to you. I won't start now." He studied her face like he was memorizing it. "If you stay, there will be danger. People will try to use you to get to me. My world is violent and complicated and sometimes very dark. But," his voice softened, "I will never let anyone hurt you. And I will never lie to you. Those are the only promises I can make." Zariah thought about her tiny apartment. Her minimum wage job. Her quiet, safe, desperately lonely life. Then she thought about the way he'd stepped in front of her without hesitation. The way he'd called her real. The way his eyes warmed when he looked at her. Maybe she was crazy. Maybe this would destroy her. But standing here with her hands in his, feeling more seen and alive than she had in years. "Okay," she whispered. His eyes widened slightly. "Okay. I'll stay." For a moment he just looked at her. Then he pulled her closer, not roughly but inexorably, until she was pressed against him. One hand cupped the back of her head. The other wrapped around her waist. "You're sure?" he asked, his lips close to her ear. "No. But I'm doing it anyway." She felt him smile against her hair. "Then you're braver than you think." He pulled back enough to look at her face, his hand still cradling her head. This time when he leaned in, nothing interrupted them. His lips met hers softly at first, questioning, careful, then deeper when she responded. The kiss tasted like whiskey and danger and something electric that made her forget every reason this was a terrible idea. When they finally broke apart, both breathing harder, he rested his forehead against hers. "Mine," he said quietly. "Yours," she agreed and meant it. The door opened again. Du-hyun had left it unlocked this time. The silver-haired man from earlier stepped in, then stopped when he saw them. His eyebrows rose. Everything's handled, he said in English, clearly for Zaraya's benefit. The Tanaka group understands the message. Doohyun nodded but didn't let go of Zaraya. Good. Clear the penthouse. I'm done for tonight. The man's eyes flickered to Zaraya, then back to Doohyun. And her. She stays with me. If the man was surprised, he hid it well. He just nodded and left, closing the door quietly behind him. Zaraya looked up at Doohyun. What happens now? Now. He brushed his thumb across her cheekbone again, that gentle touch that seemed at odds with everything else about him. Now I take you somewhere safe. Tomorrow we figure out how to keep you alive in my world. That's comforting. I promised not to lie. But his expression softened. I also promised to protect you. And I've never broken that kind of promise. They left the office together. The penthouse was nearly empty now. Just a few security personnel cleaning up. They barely glanced at Zaraya as Doohyun led her to a private elevator she hadn't known existed. As they descended, his hand found hers. The bandages on his knuckles pressed against her palm. No regrets yet, he asked. Ask me tomorrow. He smiled. Fair. The elevator opened to an underground garage where a black car waited. The driver opened the door without comment. Doohyun guided Zaraya inside, sliding in beside her. As they pulled away from the building, Zaraya looked back at the penthouse rising into the Seoul night. Somewhere up there she'd been a nobody, a temporary worker who'd made a mistake. Just another invisible face in the crowd. Now she sat beside a man who terrified and intrigued her in equal measure. Her hand still in his, her heart still racing. The city lights blurred past the window, and she had no idea where they were going or what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt alive. Seen. Chosen. The mistake hadn't been the spill. It had been the moment she'd looked up and met his eyes, because that single moment had changed everything. Doohyun squeezed her hand gently. You're thinking very loudly. Just wondering what I've gotten myself into. Something dangerous, he said. Something impossible. He turned to look at her, and in the dim light of the car, his eyes were warm. Something real. She leaned against him, and his arm came around her shoulders. Natural. Like they'd done this 1,000 times before. I don't even know what you do, she said quietly. Not really. I know. Are you going to tell me? Eventually. When you're ready. And if I'm never ready? He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. Then I'll find ways to keep you anyway. The car drove on through the night, carrying them away from the chaos and toward something neither of them could predict. But Zaraya had made her choice, and so had he. She'd entered the night invisible. She left it chosen. And whatever came next, they would face it together. If this story kept you hooked until the end, don't forget to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think Zaraya's new life will look like? Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next story. Thank you for watching.